This week on Who Deserves to Be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we take a look at the nominations list for induction into this year's class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The nominees for this year's class for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have officially been announced. The list is as follows: Bad Company, The Black Crowes, Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol with Steve Stevens, we'll explain that in a minute, Joy Division / New Order, Cyndi Lauper, Maná, Oasis, Outkast, Phish, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes. Of course, I've got some thoughts on this. First, let's go over the snubs. What? No Iron Maiden, B-52s, Steve Winwood, Pixies, Chic, Rufus, Blue Oyster Cult, Sinead O'Connor, Barry White, The Runaways, The Smiths, Alice in Chains? Seriously? Hopefully they'll at least put a couple of them into the musical excellence category in May when the final list gets announced. I know that there was a very last-ditch effort to get Phil Collins onto the list as a solo artist, but that didn't pan out. He deserves recognition and induction as well, so hopefully next year he'll be on the list. Plus, everybody and their grandmother thought that Pink and Linkin Park would at least make the list in their first year of eligibility this year, since they seem to have the strongest resumes out of all of the first-time eligible artists this year. Didn't happen. Well, maybe next year. Next up, the surprises. Chubby Checker? They actually found someone from the 1950s who hasn't been inducted into the hall yet? I'm shocked. I honestly thought that he had gotten in years ago, truthfully. In fact, he's been eligible for the hall since it began in 1986. He'll probably get in this time, if not as a performer, which I don't think he's going to, then in the musical excellence category. The reason? The original TikTok dance craze before the people who actually created TikTok's own fathers were even conceived. That would be the twist for all of the kids out there. We'll explain in the coming weeks how important Chubby Checker is to rock music history. Surprise number 2, Maná? Okay, that one came straight out of left field. Not sure if Maná will get in, but wow. I can already hear the screams of wokeness coming from all sides. Oh well. We'll take a look at their case in the coming weeks. The Black Crowes? Didn't see that one coming. They had 2 great albums and broke up for 15 years. Them and Maná are kind of the head scratchers this year, along with Chubby Checker. I do love the Black Crowes and Maná, but I'm going to have to look at their cases in a few weeks. The first-time nominees this time around, by the way, are the aforementioned Chubby Checker and Maná, along with Bad Company, the Black Crowes, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol, Outkast, and Phish. Quick hits as to who I think will probably get into the performers category at least. Well, I will start with some induction history in the, let's call it the post-Jan Wenner hall-controlled era. Rule number 1, at least one hip-hop act gets in. Whether you agree with the genre being there or not, it's there, so handle it. That said, there's only one hip-hop artist who's nominated this year, and that's Outkast, and deservedly so. So my thought, they're probably in. Rule number 2, if you did a surprise performance or were a surprise presenter the year before at a nomination ceremony, you seem to kind of be a shoo-in to get into the hall yourself in the next couple years afterwards. Few cases in point. Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails shows up to induct The Cure in 2019. The next year, 9 Inch Nails finally gets in. John Taylor and Simon Le Bon of Duran Duran do a surprise presentation. Within a couple of years, Duran Duran are inducted. Peter Frampton does a surprise performance with Sheryl Crow at her induction ceremony. The next year, he's inducted in. Last November, at Ozzy Osbourne's induction, who's one of the surprise performers? Billy Idol. Who's nominated this time for the first time? Billy Idol. He's getting in the next couple of years, if not this year. Also deservedly so. let us also explain the fact that Billy Idol has already said that his longtime guitarist and writing partner, Steve Stevens, is going to be inducted with him as well. Sort of like when Pat Benatar inducted her husband / longtime guitarist, Steve Giraldo. Rule number 3, an R&B artist gets in. That's been going on for decades, even pre-Jan Wenner. So it's not just a recent thing. This year, there's only one, and it's the Queen of Christmas herself, Miss Mariah Carey. She stands a better than average chance this year, and again, deservedly so. Rule number 4, at least one good old-fashioned hard rock group gets in. Last year, it was Foreigner. This year, it's probably going to be, I figure, Bad Company. I'm hedging that bet, though, because Soundgarden is back on the list for what feels like the umpteenth time. So this year has to be their year, right? Also, Oasis is back together, and they're back on the list. So this is probably the only time the Hall will ever have a chance to have them show up, provided, of course, that they're still together later in the year when the award ceremony actually kicks in. I think that's usually in November now. There's no guarantees when it comes to the Brothers Gallagher, let's be real. The funny part about all of this was that Noel Gallagher said that the Hall was full of wankers, as he likes to call people whose we can't say the other word, that it's actually supposed to be in American English. But in British English, they're called wankers. Then Noel says in the next breath that he would show up to the ceremony, even after he just put down the Hall and called everybody a bunch of wankers. So, yeah. It's British slang for idiot or moron, in case you didn't figure that out. I cleaned it up. It actually means something a lot stronger. I also figure that the Hall have to put in a couple of the British groups in there because they usually do it every couple of years or so. This year, I think that would be Joy Division / New Order, although technically Billy Idol, who we already covered, is British, therefore. Joe Cocker, Cyndi Lauper, Phish, and the White Stripes all deserve induction, but the Hall can only put in somewhere around 6-7 artists into the performers category, so you can't put everybody in. Out of that grouping, Cyndi Lauper probably stands the best chance because of rule number 5. Try to put one female pop rock singer in. Mariah gets the R&B nod, so Cyndi should get the pop rock nod this time around. Of course, this could all go right out at the window because of who's in charge of the government at the moment. Because in this era of appeasing the American government officials who decide surely that this list is probably yet another sign of wokeness, according to them, the Hall might decide to not anger a bunch of people on that side of the fence, so let's not make the class so diverse. Stick with the way Western society seems to be going these days. Put in strictly white male rock artists and leave diversifying the Hall for a few years down the road. In fact, I do know of more than a few fans who would really like to see that happen and make it a strictly white rock guys domain. You can find those people on other podcasts and videos on the subject, mind you. As they have for the past decade or so, the Hall has a fan vote, which does count towards who gets inducted. Go to vote.rockhall.com to vote. You can vote for up to 7 different artists once a day until April 21st. We'll put that link in the show notes for you, by the way. This year, we'll do what we usually do. We'll take a look at the cases for at least 2 nominees per week until we run out of the nominees. Yeah, it should take about 7 weeks. We will start next week by taking a look at 2 artists who we've beaten the drum for before, Oasis and Soundgarden. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.